Boop 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 ba doop.
Do 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 do.
Do 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 do.
Do 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 do.
Do 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 do.
Do-do-do-do-do.
Boop ba-doo.
Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Do do do.
Boop boop. Bloop bloop bloop. Do 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 do. No, I'm just kidding. Do 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 do.
We'll play Mario with Lincoln, and he knows that like when you go down a tube, like a pipe, he goes bloop 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 bloop. It's really cute.
I love it. Guys, welcome to Real Awkward.
Welcome.
The best damn podcast you've heard today.
Thank you, Robot Man.
That wasn't me. I pressed a button.
Oh, I saw it.
Button. My name's Andy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ashley.
Guys, if you have never heard this podcast before, you're in for a real treat, my friends.
Oh,
we
yes,
have
you are.
so much fun here on the podcast.
What's happening?
You just scared so many people away.
Yeah.
Guys, we talk about all nerd culture, fun, geeky stuff. We have something special for you today. If you have clicked on this episode, that's because you want to know about the Nintenders, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So first I got to talk about, Nintendo in general.
Oh, hold on a second. Are we talking about like Nintendo?
No.
Or like what every older lady calls a game system?
Yeah.
A Nintendo.
Yeah, like when you had a PlayStation, it's like, what are you and
You've
Derek
been
playing?
playing that Nintendo all day.
It's like, this is PlayStation. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
Do the dishes. Finish your Nintendo.
Get off your Nintendo.
Damn
Do your
Nintendo.
homework.
This episode is part of our 101 series. If you guys have not checked those out, we have done some awesome stuff that introduce you into the topic at hand. This is kind of like a For Dummies podcast, right?
Yeah,
You know what I'm
it's kind of like a once over. So we've done an anime one, a comic book one, a wrestling one.
And another one that we haven't debuted yet.
I was gonna say, don't put yourself in a pigeonhole depending on when we release the episode.
Whoopsie dipsy.
So
Whipsy dipsy.
I said
Whipsy
whoopsie
dipsy.
There's actually an episode of Friends where Chandler says it wrong. He says, what does he say? Whoop-a-pash or something like that. They're like, no, dude, it's whoop-a. Like, you're whipped. He's like, nuh-uh, it's whoop-a-pash. He's like, no, you're saying it wrong. So that would be it. Whipsy dipsies. I've done a whoopsie dipsy. Okay, everyone's left the podcast. Listen, guys, the Nintendo 101 is going to be about the NES. This series is going to also follow other game consoles down the line, but today we're specifically talking about the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Oh wow.
8-bit graphics.
Okay.
Okay, so first I got to ask some questions to my two counterparts here. What do you guys know about Nintendo? Like when I say NES, what do you think about? Like nothing?
I feel
They
like
both
that's
stare at me.
I mean, wait. So do you
When
want to
I'm
know
like,
what?
hey Amanda, you a fan of the NES? What would you think? you just say, or what do you?
I feel like it's just kind of a loaded question. Like, there's a lot to say about
And
that.
I guess
Maybe.
that's my question. Is like, what do you want me to say?
Well, I guess for some
'cause-
people, they would just, do you instantly just think like, oh yeah, Mario and Zelda? Or do you think of like the type of controller? Do you think about the console?
I guess for myself, I would think about the look of the controller, the console, the look of how the games are, the cartridge itself,
Right.
and then a couple of the core games that I would probably have played on it.
Right. And you played Nintendo as a kid or not?
Yeah, it came out before I think I was born,
Right.
but my dad had one, and we would play it.
I was going to say, for anybody that is a fan, if this is just a recap, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and those things with it. From this point forward, when I say Nintendo, I'm talking about the NES. I'm not
Sure.
talking about the Super Nintendo. I'm not talking about a
That's fine.
64. I'm not talking about
The company.
like you said, Mom's PlayStation, which is a Nintendo. We're talking about the Nintendo, the original Nintendo here in the U.S. So what about you, Ash? Did you ever have or play a Nintendo?
I never had one. I recall playing Duck Hunt.
Oh, yes.
And I
That's-
feel like that's all I remember.
That's some people's jam. Like when they think of Nintendo, they're just like, I just want to like blow up some birds and have my dog go pick them up.
Yep. That's. Yep.
Which, as a kid, I don't know if you guys can speak for yourselves, but I thought that was amazing.
It was really
Oh,
cool.
totally.
Like-
and I liked I mean, a lot of 8-bit games have great music.
Right.
But I liked the music in it because if you shot a bird, the music was cool. And then
Yeah.
if you missed it,
Right.
the dog like made fun of you in a way.
Right. Yes. Yeah. There were some cool stuff with Nintendo and the development of their video games. But you guys clicked on this because you want to know what is up with Nintendo. I want to learn about Nintendo. I want to know what the Nintendo is about. I want to know what this game culture is about. How did we get here? This is kind of the roots. Like, so when you talk about grassroots of where we are today in video games, the Nintendo has to be on that list for like the first starting out of the gate. Now, this wasn't the origination of video games. That was around before Nintendo.
No, because I don't want to talk about this for too long.
Yeah.
But basically, the Atari came out before the Nintendo.
Absolutely. There was and 30 to 70 other consoles.
Yes.
Yes.
But then the Atari was like one of the big ones.
Yeah, that was a big name.
But then, so you had this initial craze.
Yes.
And then a couple bad games on the Atari kind of almost sealed the deal on video games.
So it actually wasn't a couple. It was like hundreds.
Yes, I just mean
yeah.
Well, because they were trying to crank out games so fast.
Yeah, so basically what was happening is from the 70s all the way up until 1983, there was hundreds of video game consoles. ColecoVision, Intellivision, freaking Atari, right? And a bunch of others. Magnavox made some stuff, and Sharp, I think, made some stuff. And at this point, number one, don't quote me on that. I'm probably wrong on those two names. But in general,
Sure, whatever.
there was no quality control.
Right.
They basically were like, hey, here's a system. Anybody can make a game. And the games would be sometimes dog shit. Now, the covers would be amazing.
No.
Like, that's how games were sold back then because they were 1 bit. It means there was literally 1 dot on the screen or a series of 1 dots that created an image. But it looked very archaic. If you know Atari, you know what we're talking about with the way that screen works. So in 1983, so many crap games, crap. E.T. comes out.
I was going to say, then E.T.
right?
came out.
E.T. came out. It was rushed in 6 weeks. They brought this game out. It didn't make sense. Nobody understood it. It literally was kind of like the start of it. They made so many because it was a licensed title. They literally threw the shit in a landfill.
Wait, E.T. came out for the Nintendo?
For the Atari.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. E.T. came out for the Atari in 1983, and it was vastly rushed, and it ended up being a terrible game. And this was like, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back, basically. Everybody was like, dude, all these games keep coming out. Nothing's good. Like, we're paying 40, 50 bucks probably per
kind of
cartridge.
Like, if this is what video games is, this is shit.
Yeah, it's like, I'm out of here. So it is actually called the video game crash of 1983.
Yeah.
So stock was high, and it all plummeted within like a couple months. We're talking like there was billions of dollars moved to millions of dollars in the entire industry. So everybody pulled stock or clearanced it out. So we're talking like every video game store was like, we are not selling this stuff anymore. It's garbage. Let's clear it out. And everybody lost tons of money.
Yeah.
So, and most people are like, why does this have to deal with Nintendo? It's huge because now Nintendo, which was originally a
playing cards
in 1889 is when they started their playing card company. They ran with that until like the late 60s to early 70s. It was literally just for playing cards. It was Nintendo's game company, but it was games about playing cards. That was it. And so Nintendo, they started in 1983. They created what's called the Famicom.
Yep.
The Famicom stands for the family computer. This is Japanese. It was released in Japan. It was a hit over in Japan. So the U.S. market got nailed by all of this video game crash of 1983. The Famicom comes out in Japan, super successful. People love it. It looks like a toy, though. So it's like red and white. The controllers sit on the side of it. It seems very flimsy, I think, when you look at it. But it was successful. So Nintendo knew that they had something awesome on their hands. They were like, we've got this Famicom, but now we got to get into the U.S. market. Okay, how do we do this? There was just a crash in 1983. Everybody liquidated their stock. They think video games are an effing joke. What are we supposed to do? So Nintendo started to come up with these fantastic ideas. Like, they were doing everything they could. So arcades didn't die. So consoles died, but the arcade scene was still pretty popular. If you guys are familiar, there's an arcade called Donkey Kong. right?
Yep.
What?
Okay. Donkey Kong was like that go-to. So when you made these consoles, everyone was like, we want you to be able to play Donkey Kong at home. So that was like everyone's go-to. Like they were like, how do we make Donkey Kong like a true Donkey Kong port? So that kind of lit the fire under all of these video game consoles trying to mimic the arcade because it was so successful in the arcades. So Nintendo, they're working really hard at it. They create something for the US market that they call the AVS. It's like the Advanced Video Game System. And it looked very much like a home computer. It was they took away that like red and white color from the
Toy
Famicom.
look.
And it's like a full working keyboard. There's a zapper with it that actually turned into a wand.
Oh, cool.
And all the controllers were wireless. And you could put like the controllers in like a little compartment. There was like a disk drive that was separate for it too. The problem is from the market, people were already just tired of the video game consoles.
Yeah.
Okay. And what had happened is Nintendo was trying to get their foot in the door in the market. And they continued to laugh them off. Like there would be all these retailers that were just like, we're not going to put another video game console in our goddamn store. Like we have lost money on it. We have been investing in companies like yours for the last 10 years. Atari screwed us over. ColecoVision screwed us over, right? So they kept being pigeonholed in this box. Meanwhile, in Japan, the Famicom's kicking ass. It's doing
it's
great.
huge.
So like, how do we get this damn thing in America? So arcades were prevalent. They were doing awesome. They took that system, that AVS system, and they actually created what's called the Arcade Versus Nintendo, where they could take the cartridges that were in the Famicom, put them in an arcade cabinet, and switch out games. So it's basically the Famicom guts in an arcade cabinet,
Yeah.
which gave you an opportunity to test out video games in the US and see what would do well. So they worked really hard on their arcade cabinets first, build branding on Nintendo's like name. They were basically like, how do we make sure that people know we're still kick-ass? Like we've got quality stuff, and they need to know how a console would do. So Nintendo worked really hard, and they started to mock up designs for this new system. Now, I talked about the AVS that looked like a home computer, had keyboard console with it. They knew no one would care. They knew that it would look too much like another version of the Atari crap, right? So they redesigned it, they slimmed it down, and they're like, what in the world would this, would gather people's interest? And they're like, what if we made it look like a VCR?
Yeah.
So if you think about it, VHS tapes were craze back then, right? Like that was the high end, the beta, the VHS war was happening in the early 80s. VCR one, it's like, well, make it look like a VCR. So no one will question it. And then on top of it, let's package it with a toy.
Yes. So
yeah.
this is where I start to know how Nintendo
Right.
got into America.
Right, you're a little
I wasn't not
privy
listening
on it.
to you just now, by the way, when I was on my phone. I realized like I don't think I knew what an AVS looked
Yeah,
like.
yeah. Did you look it
So
up?
I googled it.
Right.
It literally you'd think like this is an old computer
Yeah,
setup.
it's what it looks like. Yeah.
It's the old computer colors and everything. It looks like a computer. So I know you're going to get there, so
Yeah,
I'm not going to
sure,
jump too far ahead.
sure.
This is where I start to know how Nintendo got their foot in the American market. Was they weren't marketing a video game console; they were marketing an interactive robot toy.
Right. So basically, what they did is they marketed and they did everything they could to not call it like a video game console.
Yes.
So they called the games game packs instead of cartridges because that's what Atari called their stuff, was a cartridge. They called it on their merchandise, they took out the console and made it a control deck, is what they called it.
Got it.
They're like, get our control deck with our controllers that use a game pack to control Rob
Yes.
the robot, which was
Yes.
this robot that like you played this game and based on how you moved on the screen, Rob could move things up and down and it would control his robotic arms and those types of things. So
I think Rob is super cute.
he's cool.
I would
Yeah.
love a Rob, but knowing my
Right.
life, my kid would think he was a real toy, and,
And
my
bust him.
investment would
Right.
be ruined.
And I think Nintendo called it the deluxe package, if I'm not mistaken, which got you Rob the robot,
Deluxe.
and then you got just the control deck package, which had bundled Super Mario Brothers, like in it,
Okay.
as those options. So they're struggling still, right? They're just like, it's a toy to market. Some of them were kind of like, wait, this is a game console. So Nintendo had a sales guy. I didn't write his name down because it doesn't really matter in the story to me, but he went in And they're like, let's hit up our New York market, okay? We're going to pay for everything. We're going to go into your store. We're going to staff it. We're going to set up all of your marketing. We're going to have people come in, test this stuff out, play this stuff. Not only am I going to give you 90 days credit on all of your merchandise, you can return it if you want to, but also we are going to be covering like the staff wages. Like we're talking...
It
This
will
was
be
like-
free for you to
This
sell
was like
this.
people... So what it said when I was researching it is they were like, sure, it's your funeral. Like,
Kinda.
bring your shit in. Not our problem if you falter. Who this sales guy was...
Well, they obviously are making enough money in Japan to be able to do this.
Well, he didn't tell Japan headquarters
oh,
that what he was doing. He basically was just like, for us to be successful, we have to get this in people's hands.
Yes.
And we have to have them play it. And we have to figure out how we're going to jump back into this market.
Yeah.
So here's the problem is press back then, right? Magazines, newspapers, stuff like that. They're like, Nintendo's crazy. They're like, did you not know that there was a crash in 83?
yeah.
Literally the same year you're trying to push another console out here, right? So 85 is when they actually started to hit the market, but there's like this year of 84 where Nintendo's like slowly trying to throw in, we've got a toy console thing here that you should
It's
check
a
out.
robot,
They-
not a video game console.
Yeah, and they went back and Nintendo was like, okay, let's get rid of the fancy colors and let's make it look more streamlined like a VCR. Let's give some grays and some blacks in
Was
it.
this
make it more
before
boxy.
or after the New York guy?
This is when they are taking the AVS down to like a manageable console.
Got it.
At roughly the same time that they're going to be presenting it.
Got it.
Like at their Tokyo Game Show and those types of things too. So the press is basically like they're questioning Nintendo's sanity. They're
Yeah.
like, you're going to lose millions of dollars in this
Yeah.
market. Like there's no way that you can do it. So they do it and they package Rob the Robot and they bamboozle everybody. Like they're just like, they have no idea what's going on. They're like, this Rob thing is cool, but who cares about Rob? Have you guys seen the games that come on this console?
Yeah.
Have you guys seen like what's available for this thing? So Nintendo learned a lot from the way that this crash happened. So because there was no quality control with Atari and all these other consoles, Nintendo actually had specifics if you wanted to produce for them. So number one, it had to be 2 years exclusive on Nintendo only. That was unheard of. You could basically develop for any console back then, but it was like you only 2 years. And then you couldn't produce more than 5 games in a single year. Because they would pump stuff out like, imagine Pong. Pong probably took you, once you knew what you were doing, a week to develop your game, pop it out. Make a bunch of copies, pop it out. So they said five games within a year. And then they also did their first lockout chip, which meant that you could not use the game on anything other than Nintendo. So you couldn't take that cartridge and like pop that into something else.
Oh, sure.
Right, or
It
take
was
the
like
software and-
proprietary,
Right.
yeah, hardware.
So when you think of Nintendo, you think of Super Nintendo, right? It always had like a special type of cartridge
Yeah.
for it to go into.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want you to be able to use it for other systems.
Sure,
well,
I
this
get
was
that.
Nintendo's first like entry into what they are now today. They hold their shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally no one is allowed to use the IPs. No one is allowed to use the characters.
Yeah.
They didn't want anybody stealing the technology. So
But it makes sense because it's the first steps in them very much hardcore branding their stuff.
Right. Yes, and the fact that they were trying to make it look, they're trying to make it look like a VCR, so like the game pack slid into an open
Yeah.
like door, right? Versus everything was top loading back in the day. Atari, ColecoVision, it all came into the top.
Well, and the way
So
that you
trying to change it
insert
over.
the way that you insert an NES cartridge in
Yes,
is exactly what a VHS would do.
Right.
You'd put the VHS tape in and push it down.
and push it down, and then
Yeah.
you could just and it would start up. You press the
Yeah.
power, and it would just start up. In this time frame too, Nintendo started to focus not only on the quality but also the design of the games. So, of course, graphics mattered. They moved from the 1-2-bit graphics to the 8-bit quality graphics, and then they worked on the sound design.
Yes.
Anybody that knows Nintendo knows their sound on the NES was unique. You didn't get that stuff with Atari,
No.
right?
You'd get just like little chips and blips.
Yeah,
but-
they knew that you could take that music and have it accompany the gameplay for the first time. So now you've got iconic sound for games like Mario, games like Zelda, games like Metroid. This is all stuff you never heard before. And now it's turned into basically like the ethos that is Nintendo comes from some of these original games. They fought for this music
And
before that
honestly,
was
like,
not important.
I love it's called like now we call it chiptunes. But like
Right.
I,
Sure, yeah,
I
chiptunes,
love
yep.
that stuff.
Yeah.
I have multiple albums that I listen to all the time when I just want music, but I don't really want words or anything. It's just like songs that are put into like 8-bit sound, like
Right. Oh, sure.
and it's
Yep.
fun,
Yeah.
and it's very like it. And I always found it interesting that just the sounds that you were able to make on these little like keyboards, just with like the sound of these consoles,
right.
you can make music out of it, and
Some of them amazing.
it's like whoever figured that out was a genius.
Well, Nintendo putting all of this together, right? They've got these rules, these regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Now they were actually able to stamp what was called the Nintendo Seal of Quality.
Yes.
And if you're unfamiliar with a Nintendo cartridge, it has this small, what looks like almost like a ribbon star
Mm-hmm.
on it that says Nintendo Seal of Quality. And that meant that they verified that game was legit. It was a good quality build. It wasn't shovelware. And if
Yeah.
you guys aren't familiar with the term shovelware, it means when you can create software quickly that has basically no backing gameplay, no constructive
Garbage.
Garbage. This happened with the Wii that was more current. Okay,
Yeah.
the Wii was very popular. When a console becomes popular and developers know that they can make something for it and make some money, then they quickly push stuff out. They push stuff out that's not quality. It's called shovelware, and that was happening in the video game crash of 1983. So Nintendo finally had a seal of quality. So you could not have a game on the system without that stamp. So there were some things Nintendo was doing right, like just figuring it out. And at this point, this was relatively new to everybody. Like there was the Famicom over in Japan, but for us, we're like, we knew Nintendo because of some arcades and we knew
Yeah.
some playing cards maybe, but this console, like how do you get into a market that was so volatile before? So the crazy thing is you could think about it this way. If that didn't happen, if that sales guy didn't bust his ass and lie, if he didn't like set these contracts up that could have destroyed Nintendo back on the other side, if they didn't fake it out and say that it was a robot toy instead of a video game console, we might not have seen Nintendo the way that we did. Nintendo was over fighting with Sega at the time. Sega had their called it like the 1000 Master System, I think. And that had market share over in Japan. Like originally Nintendo and Sega, both Japanese companies, they're fighting like over this market share of video games. And US was technically an untapped market because Europe was flopping. Russia was just coming out of the disband of the USSR,
Yeah.
right? And so you've had no other markets. So USA was like your make or break deal. So they were playing.
Do you
very
know,
interesting.
like, the chicken before the egg?
Yeah,
Like, the marketing guy who made all those promises or those guarantees.
right.
Did that come before or after they started this, like, seal of approval thing? Like, did they do it as a result of him being like, I've made all these promises now, and they're like, well, crap, we better make sure that this, like, we can back
Yeah.
this up because,
Well, they knew,
or vice versa.
They knew just because of their success with the Famicom that quality games were going to keep the market going. So they already had that going with Japan.
Yeah.
in
So that
83.
marketing guy already had that security
Yeah, he
to be
knew.
like, I'm confident
Yeah.
that this is not going to be a bust.
He knew, but how do you convince these retailers that just got boned
Yeah.
by thousands, if not millions of dollars
Yeah.
from these shitty Atari machines?
But that really
and
does back him
Coleco
up to
machines.
be
Yeah,
like,
right.
like we're guaranteeing that this is not shovelware. This is quality. It's got all these extra aspects to it, like the
Yeah.
music, etc. Like he had material to be like, this is why I know that this is not going to flop.
Well, and he had to go to them and classify it as a toy under the retailer's. It's called the retailer's product description. So it was not categorized as a video game console or an electronic device. It was categorized as a toy. So that got him into the retail, because we're talking like retailers would not use the product. FAO Schwartz, hey, we want to come in. Like, we're Nintendo. Nope.
Yeah, no.
Like, what are you supposed to do? So
Yeah.
they literally went and they devised their own plan to go to this small, like, New York market and go to these stores and say, we're going to staff your store. We're going to sell this product ourselves.
Yeah.
You just need to let us have the space. That's it. And you don't have to pay for any product. It's going to bring people in. Like, That's not heard of today.
No.
Right.
I'm not going to go into Target and I'm going to be like, I'm staffing it myself. I'm bringing everything in. Like, you don't have to pay for anything. Like, that doesn't work. Everybody wants something for it. So it could have flopped. Like, it could have been an absolutely terrible situation anyway for Nintendo. So with the quality, you had these developers. So it's like third-party developers, okay? Nintendo's great. Nintendo had Donkey Kong. They had Mario. Some of this stuff had been in the arcades previously, right? They're porting it over to this console. It looks great. But Nintendo overall didn't have a lot back then, right? There was no Kirby's yet. There was no Star Foxes yet. Like, all of these IPs were pretty small. So you had some of these third parties coming to them, but they didn't have a way to do any production. Like, they're like, hey, we've got some games. Like, we're interested in working on some stuff with you, but I've got no production. So how can you help us out? So Nintendo actually said, we'll produce the games. It's going to cost you 20% of the production cost and then 10% for licensing fees. So Nintendo got 30% cut out of every single game that was developed for these third parties. The first one to come to them was Namco, who does Pac-Man.
Yeah.
And then Hudson Soft. If you guys aren't familiar with Hudson Soft, they actually created what's called the TurboGrafx.
Is that the one? It's like the little bee.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So yes, it's a logo of like a little bee.
Yeah.
But these third parties would develop things for Nintendo, but now they're stuck on Nintendo platforms.
Right.
Right? I mean, with the licensing fee and everything, it's like, and you need Nintendo seal of approval and quality.
Yeah.
So Nintendo did a lot of things right, but they really strong-armed. Like, for a long time, and there wasn't a whole lot of competition. So,
Well, but they were also the only video game company making money.
Well, 1983 is the Famicom, but it doesn't actually come out to the U.S. until 1985. Nintendo doesn't actually start making money on the NES until like 86,
Wow.
87. And Sega was on the horizon with the Genesis, the next system up, the
Yeah.
upgrade, 16 bits in 88. So Nintendo had like this 3-year window where there wasn't competition. There's a video game crash, and the new system's still 3 years away. So they're just bringing it, right? And at this point, they're like, okay, we got them in. We got the toys. Okay, it's a toy. Now no one cares. You could take the toy out. We're going to call it a control deck.
Yeah.
Okay, throw Mario in there. Now we need games. So 86, 87 rolls around. Zelda comes out.
Got it.
First game ever. And if you guys aren't familiar, who's listening, Zelda, Legend of Zelda, it is a huge popular series now. It is spanned from the Nintendo all the way up through the Nintendo Switch.
If you are,
It's possible
if
you don't know
are
about
a
Zelda.
nerd
It's possible.
and you have never heard of the Legend of Zelda.
If you're listening to this
have a
podcast,
problem.
Amanda wants you to peace out. Something about it struck a chord with gamers.
They're incredible games.
I mean, and the music is
Oh
to
my
this
God,
day
beautiful.
incredible. But what it did is it created the first game to ever get to 1 million sold copies.
Oh, really?
First game ever. So
I assumed Super Mario Brothers would have done that.
no, well, it's Super Mario Brothers is tough because it's a pack-in game.
Well, yeah, it
So
comes
it's like no
with
matter
it.
what, you're going to get Super Mario Brothers
Yeah.
when you buy the console. So you can't really
Count
throw
that?
that into your
Yeah.
mix. You know, yes, Super Mario Brothers was literally the best-selling game, but it was also a pack-in game, so you kind of were forced to get it. But Zelda, on its own merit, literally first 1 million copies,
Nice.
and then Nintendo, it's kind of like their creme de la creme. They're like, things started to slow down. Okay, 88 hits. The Genesis comes out with 16-bit graphics. Nintendo's like, we don't have anything till 1991.
Yeah.
That's when the Super Nintendo comes out.
Yeah.
So they're like, what are we gonna do?
What do we do?
They come out with Super Mario Brothers 3.
Right.
And that thing hits
That game is so good.
500 million copies sold.
I can understand that because it's fucking iconic.
It is-
the
oh my
music
God,
is
amazing,
incredible.
amazing.
It's easily one of my top 3 favorite Super Mario games.
Yes, right,
Period. I
right.
do have a quick question.
Yeah.
Legend of Zelda.
Yes.
Did it originally come out with the gray cartridge?
So there was special editions.
Yeah, when did the
right?
gold happen?
So gold happened later.
Mm-hmm.
Gold happened later, if I'm not mistaken. So I know that there was a special edition, like the gold one, that kind of made it unique.
Yeah.
But the gray cart variants were also produced to just create less production costs in general. So both of them were set up, but I want to say that it was later, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't actually know. I just know that there's the regular one and then the gold one.
Yeah, because most special editions would be like that. The original would come out, and then let's give them
the Game of the Year edition.
Let's give them a fancy one. Let's give them a cool one. Let's find out. I mean, think about it. If you have your game, it's the first one to sell 1 million copies. Wouldn't you do something to try to keep that train going?
Now we can get it in gold.
Oh, gold, right?
Yeah.
And that ended up being the more popular copy.
It looks so cool.
Why would it not be?
Well, true, but then now as a collector, the gray copy is actually more sought after than the gold copy.
Yes.
Now people think they want the gold copy, but if you really are looking for rarity, I think since the gold was more sought after back then, mass produced, that you would go after the gray now.
Honestly, I just like how the gold looks when it hasn't been too beat up.
Yeah, once it gets beat up, it starts to peel.
It loses the shine.
Yes.
But it's beautiful.
Right. And if you guys are just tuning in, we're talking about the Legend of Zelda, the cart variant. So the cartridge came in two separate colors. One was just the regular gray, and the other one was what was called gold, I guess.
Were there any other games that had different colors?
Yeah, so there was a couple ones. So I talked to you guys already about Nintendo having that third-party seal and the lock on it. Well, there were some companies that figured out how to get around it.
Oh.
One called Tengen.
Okay.
And Tengen was like a black cartridge, and it was different. Like, it has a different look to it.
Yeah.
I've showed you guys those before. I've got like a Roadrunner game and like I think a baseball, like RBI baseball game, but third party started to figure it out. They started to figure it out, and to be honest, it was the precursor to Nintendo hating ROMs.
Well, and I know
Nintendo hating copying
later game consoles have games that have different color cartridges.
Correct, they do.
But I didn't know if it was common for the original Nintendo.
So there was some games that kind of went that way. You've got Legend of Zelda. There is a couple, I think, that had like a blue tint to it. But commonly, most cartridges were gray.
Yeah.
They were just gray. I think there was a white one as well down the line, too. Also, some of this stuff got rebranded, changed to sell in other markets. So Nintendo didn't do well in Europe. Nintendo didn't do well in Russia. They actually had to go and create a clone system that they called like Didney, some stupid name, and then they didn't have good third-party support for it, so they were just making like a bunch of bootleg games out in Russia.
Interesting.
For this Didney system, and they had like a lawsuit and stuff from it. But Nintendo were struggling. Mm-hmm. So when I say like after the crash of 1983, they're like, what do we do?
Yeah,
we can't get into Europe. We can't get into Russia. No one cares. We're changing the name of the consoles. We're adding like bootleg copies of stuff to get people to buy it, and then the U.S. market just blew up. And people loved the Nintendo, and Nintendo became a household name. At any given point, a third of the U.S. owned a Nintendo console.
I get that.
Like, that's what you did. Like, you would play Nintendo with your friends. And, of course, parents, the first couple of years were like, it's just a toy. They didn't know that the kids were playing video games in the other room.
Yeah.
They thought the kid were playing with Rob the Robot.
Their robot toy.
So it became this marketing thing where not only did Nintendo sneak in there, because parents are like, I'm just buying a Christmas toy.
Well, probably because they're also like, I already bought you that other one that's a piece of crap. I'm not buying you this one.
Right. And there was marketing, and the marketing was different. So for Nintendo, it was, you're staying in your room, you're being safe, you're not out and about. With Sega, it was all about you're huddled around the arcade with your friends, causing trouble. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, it did everything right for it to be that console that just stays relevant for so long. So here's some crazy ass numbers. Okay.
Fix your microphone.
Thanks.
I figured he could hear himself.
Yeah,
so
I could. I was good.
Okay.
You
that's
just
get mad at us whenever we're wrong.
I do, because I can hear you.
I know.
The NES was produced until 1995 in the U.S.
Dang.
Okay. The Famicom was produced until 2003 in Japan.
Like still cartridges.
2003, still rocking the original Famicom, like the white and the red toy with games supported until 2003. It
still
wasn't
8-bit games.
Yes.
Wow.
It wasn't until the Super Nintendo came out in 1991 the Sega Genesis, and then the PlayStation hits around 94, 95, then Nintendo's like, okay, sales
We need to move into disc-based
sales
games.
are slowing down.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it literally went for that long.
Wow.
Right. Which is, I find that to be incredibly unrealistic for consoles these days to last longer than 5-6 years.
Yeah.
The Famicom came out in 1983.
That's crazy.
It lasted
For 20 years.
20 years.
That's
20
crazy.
years. That's it. It's insane. And of course, they're trying to like port stuff from the 16-bit era to the 8-bit
Yeah.
era. Nintendo's 8-bit consoles, though, to this day, your music is iconic. Your
Yeah.
games are iconic. I know we jumped into this. We kind of deferred, but Super Mario Brothers 3. That was like their send off. Like that was like, this is the last Mario game we're gonna make for this system.
Yeah.
And we're gonna throw it all in there. And if you guys don't know the story, and this could be on another episode, but it's very NES related. The popularity of the original Mario Brothers was so good, they needed a number 2. They
Yeah.
needed a Mario Brothers 2 out, and over in Japan they produced it. Super Mario Brothers 2 is a very different game than what we got here in the U.S. The problem is it's too hard. They literally increased the difficulty level. The very first level, people were dying. They couldn't get past it. And so they were like, shoot, what do? We got to like rework this, or it's not good for our U.S. market. And that was nice for Nintendo because they were able to test stuff in Japan, being kind of a smaller market.
Yeah.
And just see, did it work? Do people enjoy the game? And just they knew there's no way. U.S. wouldn't love it. Call us lazy, call us whatever. They're like, they're not going to work hard at trying to beat this game. It's going to be too overwhelming. So why they worked on that, they pulled it from a U.S. release, and we got Super Mario Brothers 2. Super Mario Brothers 2 was a completely different game. It's called Doki Doki Panic? No. I forget now. I feel so bad. I'm gonna have to put it in the comments. But this game was basically rebranded as Super Mario, and they just replaced the characters with Mario Brothers characters. So they replaced it with a Peach, they replaced it with a Toad, a Luigi, and a Mario.
It's a very
Doki Doki Panic.
Thank you, Doki Doki Panic.
It's a very different game.
Very different game, but still to this day, it is some of not only collectors, but some of people's favorite because it was so different.
It's not my favorite,
Yeah.
but I really enjoy playing it because it's fun.
Right.
But I love the music in it.
It is, yeah, it is
so
cool.
different.
If you guys don't know, spoiler alert, it ends up being a dream, so it's not part of canon.
Yeah.
Mario's just taking a nap, and he
Yeah,
wakes
he's
up, and he's
taking a
like,
nap.
damn it. But so the villains are unique. It added a lot of lore, and there's still characters that have transitioned from there
Yes,
over to
I
the
think that's
new
where you meet Shy
consoles.
Guys.
Right, yep. So the thing is they had all this time to develop Super Mario Bros. 3. Because they're
Yeah.
like, what do? We got to basically...
we have to have a good third game.
Yeah, so they didn't have to work on Super Mario Brothers 2. They just put new
They
characters
just
in it.
Slapped the characters on it.
Right, sent it out. And so
Yeah.
now it's Super Mario Brothers 3. And if you want to know how powerful the NES really was, you play
Oh.
Super Mario Brothers 3.
Oh my God.
That's like, what? If
And
you
you-
look at Super Mario Brothers 1 compared to 3,
Yes.
it's like mind-blowing.
That was my thing sometimes is like you play these games and like Super Mario Brothers, even some of the Ninja Turtle games, you're like,
Yep.
okay, this is
Yep.
Nintendo.
Right.
But then you see Super Mario Brothers 3 and you're like, this is the height of what you can do with the 8-bit graphics and what you can do on this console.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I have played that game so many times. It is so good. It doesn't get old.
No,
like,
it doesn't
is
get
so
old.
fun.
Yep. The controls are like spot on.
they're
I mean, and
great.
number 1 was great too. Like, to be honest, the controls for most of it
I have
have been
zero complaints about
fantastic.
the original Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario 3, though, it's just like it took that
Yeah.
and made it better.
And it's arguably most people's favorite Super Mario game.
Yeah, it's probably
For the side scroller stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Out of the side
Yep.
scroller ones,
Yep.
100% is my favorite.
So that's Nintendo in a nutshell. Like, that is how we got the NES console. Its popularity grew just because they faked people out, threw a toy in their house, and then they had a video game console attached to it.
Wow.
And then that's why you have Nintendo consoles
Wow.
to this day.
So what we're like, we don't have to like, I'm sure time wise we're running out
No,
of the time,
good.
but like when you think about the games that you played as a kid, like what were like a handful of the ones that you used to play?
So my favorite game of all time for Nintendo is Jackal. It's basically like these two military trucks, top down, like a shooter, and you're throwing grenades and like machine guns.
I've watched you play
Yep,
that.
and you could play it 2-player, which was really cool. Sometimes you couldn't do that couch co-op stuff. It was always like one person then another person.
Yes.
If you play Mario Brothers, you play Mario as
And
a
then
2-player.
Luigi.
You die, then it's your turn as Luigi.
Yeah.
But Excite Bike. I played a lot of Excite Bike,
okay.
which was very cool. It's a very unique one. You got to hit your jumps just right, and you have to go over these portals that fill your gas tank up.
Oh, cool.
And if you miss your gas tank, then you slow down. And if you crash, you have to hit your button really fast to get your bike back up. But that one was always cool, and it had really good music to it. Nintendo released, I think, 17 titles at launch. Like, that's what you could
Oh,
get
wow.
with the console. And I think Excite Bike was one of them.
Oh, cool.
So, and you can see they're called the Black Labels, and they have a very unique look to them. It's like very digital looking, like 8-bit style graphic art on it, and it's a black label.
Oh,
and
cool.
it won't have any special writing. It won't have any special like art font, like that type of stuff. It's very plain Jane
Yeah.
on those ones. But those are those were the original ones that were available to you, and a couple of them that control Rob as a game.
Sure.
There's one called Crew, Hard Hat Crew or something. Dude, I'm so bad at these names right now. But it's basically like Mario as a character, and you're running around like a construction zone. And then there was another one that controlled him too. But you could tell they quickly didn't invest in Rob anymore.
Oh,
It was a gimmick.
Yes, because once it was in
They
the
were
house,
just like, peace
yeah,
out.
right, yeah, once it was in the house, they're like, okay, screw Rob, guys. This is not
Yeah,
what that
they're
was
like,
about.
get the fuck out of
let's
here.
let's throw the games in there.
Yeah.
So, Nintendo, by the way, you know how they got 30% off of those third-party companies? That business plan helped them all the way until 2010. They were charging
Damn.
30% from every third party that wanted that
But I
same
think,
service.
but it's hard because especially as Nintendo continued to grow, you'd take the 30% just so you could get your game on a Nintendo console.
Yes, and they were so huge. Now,
It's almost guaranteed sales.
and Nintendo's had their ups and their downs, right? The Nintendo was awesome. The Super Nintendo fought really hard against the Sega Genesis when that first came out. And then they've had some real big winners. The Wii was a huge winner. The Switch has been a huge winner. But then you've had stuff like the GameCube and the Wii U that have not traditionally done very well.
Okay,
So,
We'll do one-on-ones.
Yeah,
on all
we'll
of
do
those.
one-
GameCube
101s
is a
on
redheaded
those ones.
stepchild that
Yeah.
doesn't get enough love. Okay.
and even the 64, it can have questions about it. So,
Sure.
but Nintendo, they did so many things right that the previous video game manufacturers before 83 didn't care about. They didn't care about the quality.
No.
They let anybody produce it. They didn't care about the music. They didn't care about creating a.
Well, there are some
Yeah.
games for the Atari that are just silent.
Yeah, they didn't care about creating a lock chip. So anybody could just produce games for whatever.
Yeah.
I could just say, "Oh, I produced an Atari game. As long as I can make the cartridge fit, I can make the shittiest game ever and sell it for $40 a piece." Nintendo was like, "No, you need our chip to make it work." So I mean, it was just they created a lot of smart decisions to make sure that their product was going to be quality. They could control it. And then that got you all the way up into today's market now, where NES games, Nintendo is still pissed if they're available for a ROM download.
Oh yeah,
Right?
it's very
Like-
difficult to get Nintendo ROMs.
Yeah. So to this day, Nintendo's still going after companies that are trying to figure out how to get those lockout chips.
Well,
like
Nintendo's
done.
always
So,
been very
yeah.
particular about their proprietary stuff.
Well, it's because of the seal of quality. It all started
Yeah.
there. They're just like, we don't want to be known for any shit games, and
Yeah.
they aren't. But
No.
sometimes that means they won't allow third parties to work with them if it's not good enough.
Or
Yeah.
sometimes it means that you wait a very long
Right.
time for a game.
Right? Or these people are like, we don't want to pay your 30%
Yeah.
cost. So it makes sense why Nintendo's kind of gotten themselves screwed up a
Yeah.
couple times. So, that's NES. That's NES in a 101 nutshell.
Cool, man.
That's where they came from. That's what it's about. The controller design had already happened a couple times over from other manufacturers. The only thing is Nintendo created that D-pad, like making that D-pad legit. So,
Yeah, honestly, that's the one thing I don't love about playing the Nintendo for an
Yep.
extended amount of time
Yeah.
is like it is not comfortable for your
right.
hands.
No, the controller itself has some, let's say, opportunities on it, but it's a very sharp controller. And when I say sharp, I mean like the edges are really
Sharp.
they're pointy.
Yeah.
And you hold it for a long period of time, you'll have indentations in your
Yes.
hand, and that D-pad will wreck your thumb
Yeah.
after a while based on the type of game that you want to play.
And
So,
honestly, you could really tell that between they moving forward, they really thought about comfortability. So
yep. And to be honest, their next incarnation of the Super Nintendo controller proves that they did everything right.
oh my god, it's so good.
The most comfortable controller
It's
in
great.
my eyes for like that 16-bit era. And then Nintendo just got the games right. Not only did the Zeldas, the Marios, the Metroid all start there, Kirby came out then. We had Contra. The Contra series
Yeah.
started there, which was incredible. Konami in general came out with the Castlevania series.
Yes.
Like this is all stuff that without the Nintendo, without a guy lying about the product,
Right.
without a toy getting it into the household, you wouldn't see any of this stuff. It would have flopped. It would have died. It would have been in a landfill, just like E.T.,
Yep.
Atari. And we would be playing just mobile iPad games for the rest of our lives? I don't know.
Who
Just
knows?
Saying
I mean-
it gave Nintendo the name that they have today that lets them make millions of dollars off of all those IPs too.
That lets him have Chris Pratt as Mario.
It's a me.
I'm
Chris
not
Pratt.
happy about it.
Awesome. You guys have any other questions about the Nintendo?
I don't think so, man.
Well,
How much did it cost when it first came out?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, I actually didn't research the cost on the system.
Oh my God.
I know. I
What are you,
screwed up.
new?
I screwed up. I'm sorry. I didn't.
Wow,
didn't-
I thought this
didn't-
was a 101.
It was a
not a
101.
level 99 class.
I think that's a 102 question.
Get the fuck out of here.
I'm pretty sure they were right around the like.
I was gonna say $200.
Do you want the answer?
Yeah.
With no game,
Yep.
$90.
Yeah. Okay.
So
the control
just
deck was
with
only $90.
Super Mario?
Yeah.
100.
Oh, it was only $10 for the additional
$10
game.
more for the
There you
game.
go.
All right.
I did read.
Why
that
would you not buy the game?
I did read that I thought the
Right?
control deck was $250 though.
I know that
no, I mean, sorry, the deluxe one that had Rob and stuff with
Probably.
it was like $250.
if I remember correctly, I know this is off topic.
Yeah.
The Super Nintendo was $199.99.
It was $199, and again, that we can go down the Super Nintendo 101 because that's like an incredible
yes.
console. It has a lot of stuff to it. but-
Rob was an extra $50.
no,
Oh.
I thought the deluxe console maybe it had additional stuff with it, but I thought it was around the 250.
Sorry.
No, maybe you're I'm
Maybe
wrong.
you should have researched it.
150. Sorry, these ladies care about price.
No, I would be very interested to find out, like so people listening, I will throw something up on our Instagram when this episode
Yeah,
goes up.
no doubt.
So check out our Instagram at Real Awkward Podcast. On our stories, I'm going to throw up a thing. I want to know what your favorite favorite Nintendo game is.
Regular Nintendo, the Nintendo.
Whether you found
the
it's a
PlayStation.
favorite, whether it became your favorite now,
Right.
or it was one when you were a kid, whatever. I'm just curious what other people play.
So that's what's crazy is so once the Famicom disappeared
Mm-hmm.
in 2003, all of a sudden Nintendo became a collector's journey.
Yes.
So collectors started to go back and play the original Nintendo game. So it was kind of like it came full circle again
Well, and one
with the
thing-
collection of full sets of Nintendo.
One thing I think
Yeah.
is really cool, and you're seeing it on a lot of different consoles now,
Mm-hmm.
is it's coming back, as in now people are making newer games
Right.
for these older consoles.
Yep.
And I think it's really cool.
It is awesome.
There's this one guy that I follow on Instagram, and he makes new games. He made a Ghostbusters 2 game.
Right. And that's what's cool is it's actually not that hard to develop now. Back
Yeah.
then, you didn't know what you were doing, but now there's algorithms and
You can make 8-bit
software.
games.
You can just create it, put it on a ROM, and
Yeah.
sell it out. So
Yeah, I think it's really cool.
We talked about this maybe, but I have a Ninja Turtle Pac-Man one where the Pac-Man is a pizza and the turtles are the ghosts.
Oh, cute.
But it's like but that's it. It's just rehashed. You code it a little bit differently, and
Yeah.
there you go.
I think
So-
it's cool. And it's a fun way to keep the older consoles fresh.
Yes.
They're not really Nintendo games.
Right.
But it's just a fun way to make new things.
If you're a retro gamer, Nintendo's in your library.
Absolutely.
And so for you to have a reason to keep going back to it, I hope is forever. So it's super awesome.
well, and I hate to say it this way, but like the Nintendo console and the games can take a bit of a beating.
Yeah.
So
they were
like,
tanks.
Yeah,
Yes.
so like
yes.
it's okay for kids to play them,
Right.
And they're pretty basic, so
Yeah.
they're not hard to learn how to play these games.
It was a D-pad, up, down,
You have
left,
two
right.
buttons and a D-pad.
A button and a B button
Yep.
and a select and start button.
Yeah.
Like you can't really screw much of it up.
Yeah.
In a lot of games you go forward and you jump. So it was very unique to its time, but it blew the whole like Atari age out of the water from the 83 stuff. And Nintendo forever, we thank you for being around. So
We thank you.
we thank you. All right, awesome guys. Amanda, where can people find us if they need to?
Okay, check out our Instagram at Real Awkward Podcast. If you like us, share this episode with a friend, and if you can, review it.
Excellent. And guys, come back and see us for our next 101 episode. Depending on what it is, we don't know. It'll be a
we don't know.
surprise.
Sure.
Ash, thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.